Hey, what's up? Welcome back, guys. New episode this week is UFC Fight Night Strickland versus Hernandez. Was without y'all last week. Missed, getting in here doing the weekly breakdown for the podcast. Sadly, no fights last week. I was enjoying a very rainy Mardi Gras in St. Louis. But we are back this week, and we're about to go into a stretch of, I believe, 7 or 8 consecutive weeks with a fight. So that's pretty awesome. I'll have, as always, a breakdown every week. So this week we got an interesting one. Going to try to keep this pretty brief. There's a couple fights that I have a decent bit to say about. A couple fights I really don't have much to say about. So going to try to keep it brief from a betting standpoint. And then, of course, at the end, I'm going to give you guys my picks of the week. So far in 2026, we're pretty profitable. So hopefully we can keep that going. And we're going to kick it off here with Carly Judice versus Juliana Miller. So this is going to be an interesting fight here. Both of these women are, not, I would say not top level ranked, but they're still young. Juliana Miller only 29, Carly Judice 26. First thing that stands out to me about this fight, you got, for some reason it says 4-3 here for Juliana Miller. I think she's actually 5-3. On her official record, and then for Carly Judice, 5-2. So 5-3 versus 5-2. Already those odds are like something that you look at and you're like, okay, this is a little shaky for sure. But Carly Judice, when I look at the betting odds on this, she is like close to a -900 favorite now. If you look at the best fight odds here, she's floating from -770 to -950, and Juliana Miller anywhere from +500 to +550. The number one thing to do in this fight is just not to bet on it. I'm not going to sit down here and break this down. Both these women, same height. Judice is going to have a little bit of a reach advantage. She's definitely more grappling heavy, has really solid hands, is coming off back-to-back knockout wins. Juliana Miller, on the other hand, inside the UFC octagon. It's been here for almost 4 years now, which is kind of crazy. But she's 2-2, wins over Brogan Walker and Ivana Petrovic, with losses to Luana Santos and Veronica Hardy. This is one of those things where, if you're a degenerate like myself, you want to throw $5 on a fight just so that you can, have something to sweat out. Take the value side, pick Juliana Miller, hope that, she can even out the records here and we can see 2 5-3 women's fighters at the end of this. The best bet is to just not bet on the fight. Carly Judice will probably win. She'll probably, expose some holes in Juliana's game that we don't know about. But that's really all I'm going to do for this one. Looks like Tapology community is 95% on the side of Judice, with 62% picking her to win by knockout, which is, that's just absurd. I believe Miller's last fight, she didn't look that bad. It was pretty striking heavy, and she won. So, I don't know. If you like value, take Juliana Miller, but I am going to whiz past that one because that is not really for me. All right, moving on. Up the card. Yadir Del Val versus Jordan Levitt. This is a fun one for sure. Del Val, coming off of his fight against Isaac Dolgarian, which was, and still is, I believe, under FBI investigation for betting fraud. Tons and tons and tons of money came in on the Del Val first round handle. It switched the fight odds from Del Val being, I think, somewhere around +250 to like a favorite before the start of the fight. Shirley got the choke in round 1. A lot of people seem to think that Dolgarian threw the fight or had some sort of pre-existing injury that people knew about because his camp exposed it. With that being said, I feel like, that's an unfortunate situation for Del Val because he clearly was not involved. He went to the fight ready, got the finish early, just like he was suspecting to do before any of that news came out. I still really think that this kid can be really good. It's 2-0 inside the UFC octagon right now with 2 rear naked chokes. Won his Contender Series fight a year and 4 months ago now. He's taking on Jordan Levitt, the Monkey King, who he's a fun fighter. Good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. always does fun stuff. I know he's a funny guy outside of the octagon. I believe there's a bunch of videos of him like twerking and stuff after winning fights, which is crazy, but funny stuff. Coming off of a nice submission win against Kurt Hollabaugh, former Ultimate Fighter champion. 3-2 in his last 5, lost to Chase Hooper, lost to Paddy Pimblett, and had a split decision win over Trey Ogden and Victor Martinez, knockout win in that time. Both of these fighters are going to be 5'9", with Del Val coming in about 2 inches behind in the reach department. I think this should probably be a fairly heavy, jiu-jitsu style matchup here, where Levitt's probably going to shoot for a lot of takedowns. Del Val's going to try to show a lot of that takedown defense. And if it hits the mat, both of these guys are really solid at jiu-jitsu, so that will be fun. The clear advantage, in my opinion, is the striking on Del Val. If he can keep it on the feet, I think he's actually got really crisp striking. He's one of my favorite prospects to watch right now. He looks like an absolute freak inside the octagon. Just always super sharp. Del Val is considered the prospect per se in this fight, but he's actually, only about a year younger than Jordan Levitt. Levitt, 30 years old right now. Del Val is 29. So this is going to be an interesting fight. I think this fight is at 145. Levitt's last fight against Hollabaugh was at lightweight. So this will be interesting. Yeah, actually, let me double check that. Yeah, this is at 145, so it'll be an interesting one. I'm going to lean with Del Val. I'm probably going to recommend the side of a finish for Del Val. Moving on up the card, we got John Ball Laposiani versus Phil Rowe. John Paul is he's a thug, man. Coming off that last fight was just disgusting. Absolutely disgusting head kick knockout win on his Contender Series fight. So he is making his UFC debut in this fight. He's coming in, 7 years younger than Phil Rowe. Rowe is solid, don't get me wrong. Most recent fight was a loss to Sukhyun Ko, who's a pretty solid fighter out of Korea. Before that, he beat Ange Lusa in a fight where he was down pretty clearly 2-0, needed a knockout finish in the 3rd round, and got it. And then before that, a unanimous decision loss to Jake Matthews, split decision loss to Neal Magny, and his last win before the Ange Lusa fight was against Nico Price 3 years ago now. Rowe's a big guy and is going to have a huge reach advantage in this fight. Typically, I like that side, but I may have a little bit of recency bias here, but I'm still going to lean with Laposiani. That's a mouthful to say, so if I'm not saying it right, I apologize. Not that any of you would probably be able to correct me, even if I am saying it wrong. But he does have an 8-inch reach disadvantage and is going to be about 4 inches smaller in this fight. But this is a dude who's got a core of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, really, really strong BJJ, strong wrestling. I believe his dad is a fighting legend. Phil Rowe, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has gotten better. He's competed in a bunch of BJJ tournaments, but, the wrestling takedown defense just still isn't great. Ko was able to get him down pretty easily several times in their last fight. John Paul, I think he's going to have a big, advantage in that department. And I think, even on the feet, he's a really scrappy fighter, sets up head kicks really well, like we saw in the last fight. I saw some of his sort of outside of the UFC fights where he did the same sort of setups to get, really damaging shots and kicks off. So I'm going to lean with JPL here. I think he's going to impress in his UFC debut. Take down Phil Rowe. I know Phil Rowe is the bigger guy. He's a pretty popular guy and he's probably going to have a lot of money on his handle. But I think JPL around -200 is good value, and I'm certainly going to be taking that for one of my picks this week. Moving on up the card, we got Ramiz Brahimaj versus Punahele Soriano. This is sort of one of those fights that's kind of like a coin flip, and it looks like it is set at a coin flip. Let me double check the betting odds real quick. Looks like Puna is anywhere from -105 to +105, with Brahimaj now the favorite. Tapology has it set as a dead even. That's what I personally have it at. Soriano's going to be an inch taller with a half-inch reach advantage. He's a guy that really relies heavily on strong wrestling, strong grappling, sort of being able to hold down his opponents coming off of a win where he was able to, hold Nikolai Veretennikov down essentially the whole fight. Brahimaj is on a nice little 3-fight, both these guys on 3-fight win streaks. Brahimaj on a nice little 3-fight win streak himself with wins over Mickey Gall, Billy Ray Goff, and then most recently in his last fight, a submission win over Austin Vanderford. I believe almost all of those fights, I think he was an underdog. So both these guys, 33 years old, almost same height, basically same reach, similar strength, similar weaknesses. That makes it for a really tough fight to predict and a tough fight to, break down. I'm going to personally lean with Soriano. I've always liked Puna a lot. I think he's good. He trains out of Extreme Couture. He shows flashes of being great. His last fight, he kind of fought a little tired. Don't know if there was something going on there. In the past, he's had solid cardio, really explosive. So I'm going to lean with Soriano here. I think, of these two guys, I believe Soriano's the better fighter. They're both on a win streak. Somebody's win streak's going to get snapped. The intangibles are too close to really break this down too hard, look into this too much. So I'm going to lean with the side of Soriano, but probably going to go fairly light on that fight for sure. Moving on up the card, this is a fight that I'm not going to break down hardly any at all. We got Nora Cornole versus Jocelyn Edwards. I am just going to flat out say I'm picking Jocelyn Edwards in this fight. 6 years younger than Nora. She's going to have a height advantage, 3-inch reach advantage. She's on a nice 3-fight win streak with wins over Priscilla Cachoeira, who we just watched fight 2 weeks ago. Chelsea Chandler, knockout win, which I saw in person in Kansas City. And Tamiris Vidal. Her striking honestly looks really solid. She's coming off with 3 consecutive finish wins. So I think the value here at minus 260 makes a lot of sense. Nora, on the other hand, she's 3-2 in her last 5, same record as Jocelyn, but she is coming off a loss to Carol Rosa, loss to Jacqueline Cavalcanti, and her last 3 wins were against Haley Cohen, I believe. Yeah, Haley Cowan, Melissa Mullins, and she did beat Jocelyn Edwards 2 years, 5 months ago, so this is a rematch. To be honest with you, I didn't even know that. They're running it back for some reason. I guess Jocelyn wants to get the win back. She seems to have made a big improvement in her last couple fights. She looks strong on the striking and the grappling end. So I'm going to lean with Jocelyn. Don't bet on it, though. That's all I got to say. I'll probably bet on it just because I bet on everything when it comes to UFC. But, yeah, don't bet on it. Moving up the card, Alden Correa versus Luis Garul. This is... Wow. 94% of the audience on Korea. Yeah. I'm going to have to go with Alden here, too. I honestly didn't know, basically anything about this guy until a couple days ago. I missed his UFC debut against Alessandro Costa. I was not watching that event until the main event, so I missed the prelims. Didn't get to see that fight. Did just rewatch it per the request of some of my buddies. Literally just last night. He actually looks pretty strong. He's got really solid striking for a flyweight. Garul, on the other hand, 2-fight losing streak to Ode Osborne and Jesus Aguilar. This is just a guy that I can't really get too behind because I don't really think he's that great, to be completely honest with you. So I'm going to roll with Alden here. I think Alden, has shown he's got strong hands. Trains out of Houston, Texas with Joshua Vaughn. So he's training with the champ, former Fury guy. Just all in all, I think this is a fight where he's going to have a lot of advantages. 3 inches taller, 3-inch reach advantage. Makes sense that he's a minus 270 favorite. He's going to be in one of my big parlays at the end of the card. I got some buddies who are also pretty heavy on him. So I'm going to tail those guys. I'm going to go pretty heavy on Alden here. Like I said, I didn't know much about him up until a few days ago, but I do see some strength in his game as per his UFC debut. Whereas Garul, I've watched his last couple fights and he hasn't really shown me anything. So I'm gonna go with Alden here. All right, so yeah, moving on up the card here. Sorry for the short breakdown on the last one, but I'm gonna move on. don't really have much to say there on that fight. I'm going to lean with Alden, but moving on up, Ode Osbourne versus Alibi Idris. This is an interesting fight. Ode's going to be the underdog in this fight, and he's just so much more experienced than Idris is here. Idris, he was undefeated until the Ultimate Fighter finale, lost to Joseph Morales, got triangle choked, honestly just didn't look that good. Osbourne, he is 1-4 in his last 5. Yeah, he, is fighting the top of the division. Steve Erceg, former title challenger, his last win was against Gurul, who I said, wasn't really great, but he did break Gurul's undefeated status at the time. And then before that, lost to Ronaldo Rodriguez, lost to Rafael Filo, and lost to Asul Amabayev. Amabayev, Erceg, these are top flyweight guys in my opinion. And I think, with the amount of experience that Osbourne has under his belt, just the competition, the level of competition of fighters that he's fought, I'm going to lean with Osbourne here. I think he can get a nice bounce back win. I think a lot of people are going to be on the side of Idris because, he had a good run in the Ultimate Fighter, but he ultimately did lose that, and you just don't know what that's going to do to a guy. He's also got, a 5-inch reach disadvantage in this fight, and he's going to come in at an inch shorter than Ode. So I'm going to keep with the theme of the pretty short breakdowns here. I'm going to roll with Ode as one of my underdogs this week, but this is probably a fight I'm going to go fairly light on, maybe have him in sort of a more high-risk parlay. Moving on up the card, we got Chidi Njokuani versus Carlos Leal. This is one of those fights where we're starting to see some interesting betting odds. Probably, a candidate for a cancellation this week. Leal was just a couple days ago closer to, I think, a minus 300 favorite. Now, I believe he's as low as, let's see if they have it here. So I don't think it's on. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it is right here. So Leal's as low as minus 125 on some books. Minus 120 I see on one book. Njokuani as high as minus 105, plus 100 range. This is a guy that was like over plus 200 just a couple days ago. I think there's some sort of betting, news that came out within some betting circles. Maybe it's an injury to Leal. Maybe it's something bigger like, a fight fix or something like that, which apparently is something that we're going to have to deal with now. But with that being said, I like Leal. I was going to pick Leal in this fight, coming off of a loss to Salikov. Thought he was going to bounce back with a big knockout win this week. But because of that line movement, I just can't put myself to, putting any money on him. If anything, if this fight does go on, I'll probably end up putting a little bit of money on Chidi, just because there has to be some sort of reason for that drastic of a line change. And, I'm not going to break this down that much because I think, this fight's probably either going to get canceled or there's going to be something fishy going on with it. So Chidi's the bigger guy, is going to have a 6-inch reach advantage. And if you believe the story that, something's wrong with Leal or that we may be seeing a fixed fight, then you're going to have to take the side of Chidi. But personally, I'd pick Leal in, a normal fight, but doesn't seem like we're going to be getting a normal fight here. So this is something to keep your eyes on and something that I definitely would be staying away from. Moving on up the card, we got Zach Reese versus Michel Pereira. This is definitely an interesting one. Another one that I probably am not going to bet on almost at all. Michel Pereira is on a 3-fight losing streak after he had an absolutely insane winning streak with, crazy knockout and submission wins. He was doing backflips inside the octagon, dancing on his way in. I've gotten to watch this guy fight in person. He did a whole dance routine before his fight against Abu Smagomedov in Kansas City. Then he went on to put on 100% the most boring fight of the night. It was absolutely horrific. I started to lose a lot of respect for the guy because of that. But, nothing I can do but move on. He's fighting against Zach Reese, who's 3-1-1 with a no contest in his last 5 fights, coming off of a win against Jackson McVeigh, St. Charles native, who I was a fan of, just definitely rooting for McVeigh in that last fight. Win over Dusko Todorovic, and then a win over Jose Medina, with his no contest coming from a groin shot against Cedric Dumas, and a loss by knockout to Azamat Bakoyev, where he just had his wrestling exposed. Personally, I'm going to lean the side of Zach Reese here. I've thought about this one a lot. Michel Pereira is flashy, but there's just so many holes in his game that he just refuses to address. And I think Zach Reese is just a slightly more rounded fighter. I think both of these guys are kind of idiots when it comes to fight IQ inside the octagon. But I think Zach Reese is just a tiny bit more complete. I think he's got much better cardio. I think he's got, a little bit better wrestling, a little bit better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think the striking side probably leans a little bit towards Pereira. But, Reese's striking actually isn't bad. He's pretty explosive. And he's going to come in 3 inches taller than Pereira in this fight with a 4-inch reach advantage. I think he's going to keep a nice little run going. I think he might, start a little win streak and try to work his way back up after an ugly loss to Azamat Bakoyev. And so, for that reason, I'm going to have to lean with Zach Reese. I think at plus money, that's actually solid value. But this is another one of those fights where I may end up, sort of leaning back and not really throwing a lot of money on it. So that's my pick for that fight. Moving on up, we've got, I believe that fight, Reese versus Pereira, is the main card opener. So moving on up the main card, we got Jacoby Smith versus Josiah Harrell. This is like one of those fights that I'm most excited for this week. You can see just by looking at your screen right here a good reason why. We got 2 11-0, undefeated, 170-pound prospects going at it. Jacoby Smith is a guy that I've watched a couple times inside the octagon. Have I always been impressed with him? Certainly not. But he has, continued to improve and prove to people that, he is a deserving fighter of being in the UFC. Coming off of a couple, nice wins by submission, knockout in his first couple trips inside the octagon. Josiah Harrell, on the other hand, this is a guy that I'm super excited about. He was originally scheduled to fight former 170-pound champion Jack Della Maddalena back in 2023, but due to a sort of brain injury that he had to pull out of the fight and wasn't re-signed by the UFC until he went on a nice 4-fight win streak with 3 wins by finish, one fight won by decision, that the UFC decided to re-sign him and give him Jacoby Smith. I think this is going to be one of those fights where I'm going to have to lean with the underdog here. I think Josiah Harrell has tons of value at plus 250. I think both of these guys are like super even keel, like really, really evenly matched. I think if you put Josiah Harrell up against Nico Price and Preston Parsons, he's also going to get a win by knockout or a win by submission. So, these are the level of fighters that Jacoby Smith is facing. I think Harrell could run through that level of fighters too. And so I'm excited that he's getting an opportunity against another 11-0 prospect just sort of out the gate in his UFC debut. So I'm 100% going to lean with Harrell here. He's going to be my underdog of the week. You'll see that at the end of the video. I'll flash that up on the screen. But we're going to lean with Harrell. He's a little bit shorter, has a reach disadvantage, but he's just a rounded guy. He's also younger, and I really think he's going to impress in his UFC debut. So moving on up the card now, we got Sergey Spivak versus Ante Delija. This is an interesting one. I have a friend of mine who's actually a distant relative of Ante Delija, which is pretty neat. Shout out my boy Marco if you're watching this. I'm going to lean with Ante here. I was leaning Ante for a long time. I'm definitely not going to change my mind. He is a little bit older than Spivak, but in terms of measurables, they're literally the exact same, both 6'3", 78-inch reach. Delija a little bit of a more sort of thin, sort of muscular heavyweight, whereas Spivak's sort of a little bit of a bigger, chunkier guy in there. Delija's well-rounded. He's got great striking. I know there's a lot of controversy in his last fight with, that knockout loss against Waldo Cortez Acosta, where, he sort of knocked Costa out, and then Costa, complained about an eye poke, which did happen, which I understand. Instead of it being ruled no contest, after Delaja had already celebrated a win, they started the fight back up, and he got knocked out in like the next 45 seconds because he dumped all of his adrenaline and just got completely pulled out of the game. So that was his UFC debut. Or actually, that was a mistake, and that was his second fight in the UFC. So he's 1-1 inside the octagon. He did knock out Marcin Tybura in his debut. So I think he's going to bounce back with a nice big win against Spivak. I really like him to win by knockout here in this fight. I think he's going to come out there angry, that last fight didn't go his way. And I think he's going to get this one done against Spivak. Moving on up the card, we've got my favorite fight on the whole card. Dan Ige versus Melquizael Costa. Melky's a guy that I've already broken down on this channel as he fought, only 2 months ago against Morgan Charrier. He's like legit one of my favorite fighters in the UFC right now. This dude is well-rounded, and he just continues to win. He also has 32 professional fights under his belt, which is crazy, considering he's, 5 years younger than Dan Ige. Dan Ige's got 29 fights on his record, but 32 professional fights for Costa. This dude fights all the time. He's on a 5+ fight win streak right now. In the last year and 8 months, he's won 5 fights. So, a win against Nerdembeek 1 year, 8 months ago. Win against Andre Fili. Nasty guillotine choke in that fight. Watch that if you get the chance. Nice win over C-Rod. Nice win over Julian Erosa in what was fight of the night. And most recently, a disgusting head kick KO over Morgan Charrier. So I'm going to have to lean with Costa here. He's my boy. He's one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. He's going to be a little bit taller than Dan. Has the same reach as Dan. Dan's got, Dynamite Dan, 50K Ige. They give him that nickname for a reason. This is a dude who always steps up to the plate and is ready for action. He's fought top level guys like Diego Lopez and Lerone Murphy in his last 5 fights. Lost to Diego Lopez, lost to Lerone Murphy, most recently lost to Patricio Pitbull, but has wins over, guys that I personally think are really good fighters inside the UFC, like Sean Woodson and Andre Fili, who they share a win over. Dan's a fun guy, but this is a fight that I don't reckon he's going to have a lot of success in. I'm going to lean with Melquizael Costa. It looks like, the public 84% on Costa. I think there's good reason behind that. Him being a -220 favorite, I think makes sense. He continues to fight, stays super active. Super cool story for Costa. And, I'm going to lean with him to get this one done. Likely by submission or decision. Moving up the card. To the co-main event, we got Jeff Neal versus Uros Medic. Quick moment of silence for the UFC Houston fans who have to watch this fight as a co-main event. That's crazy that this is a co-main event of a fight night. This should be like a prelim fight. I honestly think that there's a couple, make Costa Ige the co-main event. Ige's fought top-level guys. Costa's on a crazy long win streak. Those are two guys that are actually fun to watch, consistently, and would put on a great co-main event. But it's just bout order at the end of the day. Jeff Neal versus Uros Medic getting the co-main event. Doesn't make much sense to me, but gonna break it down pretty quickly anyway. Neal 2-3 in his last 3. Most recently lost to Carlos Prates, as expected. Has a win over Rafael Dos Anjos and Vicente Luque in his last 5 fights, but also has losses to, Ian Machado Gary and Shavkat Rakhmonov. So this dude is losing to Ian Gary, Shavkat, Carlos Prates, the 3 best young rising stars at 170 pounds right now. Got to cut him some slack. His wins are over older opponents, but, Medic, 3-2 in his last 5 on a nice little 2-fight winning streak with a KO win over Salikov, which is a good KO, don't get me wrong, and KO win over Gilbert Urbina, which, not a great win in my opinion, and then win over Tim Means a year 9 months ago with his 2 losses coming to Mick the Beck Oralby, who is a top-level prospect, and Punahele Soriano. So, Medic isn't bad by any means, but I think this is a fight where Jeff Neal just shows, the level of experience that he has. 4-inch reach advantage, he's a little bit shorter, but the striking, it's great for Jeff Neal. He's got great takedown defense. I think this is likely going to look like a striking match. And in a striking match, I reckon Jeff Neal can get it done against a guy like Uros Medic. He may not have been able to get it done against a guy like Carlos Prates, who's arguably the best striker at 170 pounds right now. Or guys like Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Gary. But he put on a great fight with Ian Gary. Like, that fight is what gains Jeff Neal a lot of respect from most fans. It was a split decision. I scored it for Gary, but, I think you could score it for Neal because of the volume and the damage that he did do in that fight. So I'm going to go with Jeff Neal here. Not going to overthink this one too much. And that brings us to our main event, which ought to be a fun one. Sean Strickland versus Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. This is one of those fights that I genuinely have a tough time even breaking this down. This is a fight that Fluffy should win, right? He's 5-0 in his last 5. Picking up wins against guys like Roman Dolidze, Brendan Allen, Michel Pereira, Roman Kopylov, Edmund Shabazian. When you're running through the sort of right outside the top 15 and top of the top 15 guys, you would think in theory that this is a fight where he should be able to run over a guy like Strickland, who, has had a tough run in his last couple fights, lost to Drickus a year ago. His last 2 losses are actually to Drickus. One against Paulo Costa. He won that fight unanimously. The fact that somebody gave that fight to Costa is ridiculous. It was a boring fight, though, and then, beat Adesanya for the belt 2 years ago, and beat Magomedov back in the day. Still trains out of Extreme Couture. He's going to be hungry for a bounce-back win here in this fight, and I respect the people that are going to take the side of Sean Strickland. I know a couple of my close friends who are really big UFC fans who are watching this video. I know we've talked about this before, and we've all picked Fluffy, and we think Fluffy will dominantly win this. I agree. I think Fluffy's going to win. I think, he has the ability to finish him. But I think it's ridiculous, to have Fluffy as close to a minus 300 favorite on some books. I'm going to put my money on him personally, just because I think Strickland's sort of on the way out, and his inactivity is certainly a bit frustrating. Well, I wouldn't say inactivity. He hasn't fought any, he's only fought once over the past year. It's just, he sort of picks and chooses his fights, which there's sort of a reason that he probably picked this fight against Anthony Hernandez. But Strickland's just he's a great talker. He's fun. He can sell fights really well. He's got a big fan base because he's a funny dude. Don't get me wrong, he's a funny guy. I like Sean Strickland, as a person outside the octagon. He puts on that sort of D-bag attitude, which I think is mostly a front for the camera most of the time. And is a pretty funny guy, just like Colby Covington, just like Josh Hokett, where, he's trying to sell himself by being sort of a D-bag type of guy. But the dude is just boring inside the octagon. You cannot deny the guy just likes to throw jabs. He likes to teep, fake kicks, fake, overhand strikes. And he likes to win by points. And I don't like fighters like that, and I don't think either does Anthony Hernandez. And I think Hernandez is gonna sort of run at Strickland here, and he's gonna make this a tough fight for Strickland in every facet. If Strickland wants to wrestle with Hernandez, yes, Strickland has good takedown defense. Hernandez has flawless takedowns. He's great with the takedowns, great with the wrestling. And as far as the striking goes, I think it's fairly similar. I think Strickland's probably a better point striker, but Fluffy's definitely the more powerful striker. So I'm gonna lean with Hernandez here. I'm gonna put him in one of my in one of my main parlays this week. But it's gonna be interesting either way when it comes to this fight. I can respect people who are gonna take the side of Strickland. I'm sure some fans who don't watch a lot of fights, who maybe be tuning into this video and am just a casual fan of fighting, will probably take Strickland. I can respect your pick, but I'm definitely going to lean with Hernandez. He's a favorite for a reason at the end of the day. I wish there was a little bit more value behind his pick, but still going to take Hernandez at the end of the day. So now to my parlay of the week, my parlays of the week, I should say. One of my parlays, I'm going to go with Anthony Hernandez, Melchizael Costa, and Alden Correa. My other parlay, I'm going to go with Ante Delija. I'm going to go with, sorry, I got to scroll down here, Yadier Del Val. And then there's one more, and Jeff Neal. So Jeff Neal, Ante Delija, and Yadier Del Val. And then as for my sort of underdog of the week straight pick, we're going to lean with Josiah Harrell. And then sort of my more high-risk multiple picks fight, we're going to go Ode Osborne, Zach Reese. Oh, sorry, I got to start down here. We're going to go John Paul Labosiani, Punahele Soriano, Ode Osborne, Zach Reese, and that's it. That'll be it for this week. I'm going to avoid throwing money on the Judice Juliana Miller fight, avoid throwing money on the Jocelyn Edwards versus Cornole fight, and I'm going to avoid throwing money on the Chitty versus Leal fight. The women fights haven't been great to me so far. There's also like basically no value there unless you just take the sides of the underdog. And this Injaquani versus Leal fight, there's definitely something strange going on there, and wouldn't be surprised if we see a cancellation. That's sort of an early prediction for me, especially in a fight night that has 14 fights already. It's rare to see 14, 15 fights anymore, so likely one of these, maybe even two of these, will fall off over the next couple days, so definitely pay attention to that. But I'll flash those parlays up on the screen. As always, if you haven't already, give this video a like, make sure you subscribe, leave a comment. Keeps me, motivated to do this every week. This is fun for me. I love to do it. I'm going to continue to do it no matter what. And I'm just hoping that, I can grow this and this can be something that I have to sort of build my portfolio over time. So I appreciate you guys for watching. We'll be back next week for UFC Mexico. Going to back it up. It is Brandon Moreno versus Leonard Kavanaugh, which is, next Saturday, the 28th. So that'll be super fun. Going to check that out. I think there's a couple fun fights on that card. Chito Vera versus David Martinez, super fun. Imanol Rodriguez, Kevin Borjas, that's a crazy cool fight. Daniel Zellhuber versus Bobby Green, also a fun fight. So, couple of fun fights. Wes Schultz making his UFC debut. Chris Moutinho bouncing back after that Malcolm Wellmaker fight, so glad to see he's on the card. We'll be breaking that down next week, probably on Tuesday or Wednesday. And I'll see you guys then. Thank you again for watching, and peace out.